Welcome to Straight Up. I am your host, Marc Patrone. Is the proposed pipeline deal through northern BC already dead on arrival? Prime Minister Carney is expected to announce the signing of an agreement with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith tomorrow, but so far Carney has provided no details and no timelines and says BC will have a veto over any such project. The leader of the Conservative Party says unless there's a timeline for construction set out from the get-go, the so-called pipeline deal is a pipe dream.
On Thursday, he'll make one of his grand announcements waving around a meaningless so-called memorandum of understanding. If it's anything other than a public relations ploy, why won't he say on what date will construction begin on a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific?
Hear, hear. The memorandum of understanding that we're negotiating with Alberta creates necessary conditions but not sufficient conditions because we believe in cooperative federalism. We believe the government of British Columbia has to agree. We believe that First Nations right holders in this country have to agree and support. All stakeholders have to back. That's one Canada.
Well, as you heard there, Carney says the project cannot move forward without British Columbia's say-so. Up to now, BC Premier David Eby has been adamantly opposed to the project. So, again, is the pipeline project dead on arrival? If so, former Conservative MP Lisa Raitt says it may be time to put the whole issue to a vote in a pipeline election. Let's listen.
At the end of the day, David, this comes down to an election, then let's go. And let's figure out exactly what we stand for. Do we want an economic bright future, or do we want to hold back different parts of the country because you're uncomfortable with your cut in a deal?
Yeah. Meantime, the CBC is reporting some Liberals are grumbling about the prospect of a pipeline deal with Alberta. This headline, some BC Liberal MPs concerned about the prospect of a new oil pipeline, according to sources. Some MPs are worried about the backlash from anti-pipeline voters in their riding. Liberal MP Nate Erskine-Smith says the last pipeline deal that allowed Trans Mountain to move forward left a sour taste.
Could you at any point support the government endorsing the construction of a new pipeline, even if those minimum conditions are met?
Well, I lived through one grand bargain already in my political life at the beginning of 2016, 2017. I don't think it went so well. So I'm a little skeptical of grand bargains. And look, I'll look at the overall picture of the deal in the MOU when it's announced on Thursday, and we'll see what Prime Minister has to say today. And I'll have lots to say once I see the details.
Prime Minister Carney may want to get rid of some of the holdovers from the Trudeau era, but at least one of them says not so fast. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly says she has no interest in leaving her current post for a rumored job as ambassador to France.
Do you have any interest in becoming Canada's ambassador to France?
Absolutely not. I'm focused on my job right now, which is to be the Minister of Industry. And to fight for every single job in this country at a time of trade tensions. And so I'll continue to do that.
And if she wants to keep her job as Minister of Industry, she may want to start reading the contracts that end up costing taxpayers billions of dollars, like the one that awarded Stellantis billions in subsidies with no jobs guarantee. Last month, Stellantis announced it's moving an assembly plant out of Brampton to Illinois, costing 3,000 Canadian jobs. I'm now joined by Jeff Rath, who is a constitutional lawyer and one of the leading voices when it comes to Alberta independence. Welcome once again, Jeff.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so people have been preparing for an announcement regarding the apparent pipeline agreement, the memorandum of understanding between Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, and the Prime Minister. What are your expectations for that announcement?
Well, I mean, I think they've already discussed it in the House. Pierre Poilievre pulled the rug out from underneath Danielle's feet. He referred to it as a meaningless public relations ploy, and I think that's a very good description of it. And then Mark Carney said something, it was like kind of not necessarily conscription, but conscription if necessary. It creates the necessary conditions, but not the sufficient conditions, and that BC and the BC First Nations will retain a veto over pipeline construction. So she's no better off than she was 6 months ago, only she's burned up all of her political capital like a drunk lighting cigars with $100 bills, right? So Danielle looks really foolish today. She got nothing out of her silly little ultimatum. You get rid of your 9 bad laws or else, and give us a pipeline or else. She's probably worse off than she was 6 months ago because she's got everybody in Alberta questioning her sanity. I mean, we all told her she was going to get nothing out of talking to Mark Carney. She doesn't seem to understand that Naheed Nenshi, the leader of the Alberta NDP, was a card-carrying Liberal when he was the mayor of Calgary, and that he and Justin Trudeau were continually whipsawing Jason Kenney like a moron throughout COVID. Well, they're doing the same thing to her. So Nenshi and Carney are pulling the strings. They're making her look completely foolish, and her base is questioning her sanity. I mean, we're going to be at the UCP AGM this weekend, and she's going to be trying to, sell this, MOU as some massive achievement, and people are going to be laughing at her. It's going to be really, really bad for her. It's, I'm embarrassed for her. It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, how does she sign on to this memorandum of understanding with the feds and then sell that, to your point, to Albertans who will smell a rat a mile away?
Well, that's the whole thing. We're not even calling it a memorandum of understanding anymore. We're calling it a memorandum of underachievement, right? That's the only MOU that we're looking at. I mean, it's, she's failed in every respect to get anything done. The only option she has left is to declare, herself in favor of Alberta independence and commit herself to leading Alberta out of Canada. But I don't think she's got the guts for it. And certainly the people around her don't have the guts for it. So she's going to be in a really, really tough position. And we'll know, I guess, at the end of this weekend, because the pro-independence forces are trying to get a 100% pro-independence board of directors elected for the UCP, which will have the ability to, select MLAs, to call special general meetings, including a review of the continued leadership of Danielle Smith, should it come to that, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll know at the end of the weekend who controls that party, whether it's Danielle Smith or whether it's the forces of independence.
Well, you helped spearhead that movement to get rid of the previous premier, right, Jason Kenney. I mean,
at this point, Danielle's still very popular amongst our base, and people, it's this constant fear, we can't get rid of Danielle because we don't want to split the party and get, a communist government elected in Alberta. But the problem that we have is that Danielle's not leading. She's playing all these silly political games. She's having, she had all those goofy what's next panels over the summer asking people whether we should have a referendum on things that she should have done 2 years ago, increasing Alberta's taxation jurisdiction, collecting more taxes in Alberta, ending immigration to Alberta at this point because we're completely overloaded, don't have enough water, don't have enough electricity, don't have enough schools, don't have enough hospitals, all of that, right? She hasn't done anything except now she wants to have like 6 or 7 referenda on asking questions about stuff she should have done 2.5 years ago. The only reason she's doing it is to confuse the issue in and around the independence referendum. And we're not buying it. We're not very happy with her right now.
And speaking of that, do you think that this so-called agreement, once it comes out and is rejected by many Albertans, that's going to boost your cause, which is Alberta independence?
Oh, there's no doubt. The strongest proponent for Alberta independence in Canada is Mark Carney. I mean, every time that man opens his mouth, we get another 1,000 volunteers. Him standing up in the House of Commons, effectively making fun of Danielle Smith, saying, "Oh yeah, this grand bargain, it's a nothing, it's a nothing burger thing. It's it's not sufficient to get anything done, but oh well, it'll keep the little lady happy. So we're going to throw her a little bone here, but nobody needs to worry. There won't be a pipeline built anytime soon." Right? Literally, I don't know if you saw the clip or not, but I think it was a week and a half ago. Somebody actually asked Mark Carney about a grand bargain with Danielle Smith. He laughed out loud. He went, "Oh, we call that an MOU." Right? It's like, don't pay attention to that. We call it an MOU. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, it's so silly that she thinks it does anything. All right. He's laughing at her, like literally laughing at her. And, I always say that once people start laughing at them, their career is over. I mean, look at Stockwell Day and his jet skis, right? Or on the jet ski, right? The minute people start laughing at you, you're done. And unfortunately, I think that's where Danielle is at. Somebody foolishly advised her to issue an ultimatum. When the 6 months was up, she then starts backpedaling to try to find a new date. Then she saw this so-called MOU as her big lifeline, that's gonna satisfy everybody, and that like she can pretend that she's accomplished something in the last 6 months. Nobody is buying it. Like nobody.
But why would you sign a bad deal? Why not say
because
no? We're not
because
going to sign.
she's desperate, right? Mark Carney has put her, like Mark Carney and Naheed Nenshi have run her into a box canyon, right? Like she's in a box canyon ambush right now. And her only way out, I'm telling you this right now, is to counterattack. And the only way to, and this is just my my former days as a soldier speaking, the only way out is to counterattack. And the only counterattack she's got is to lead Alberta in independence, which it would be the best thing for this province, right? $70 billion a year we send to Ottawa, we get less than $20 billion a year back, right? We have to run deficit budgets. We're borrowing money to pay for our doctors, nurses, teachers, all of that. Well, we send $15 billion a year to Quebec. None of this makes any sense. Alberta could literally eliminate federal income tax in year one of independence, and Danielle Smith doesn't have the guts to do it. And as the conversation continues and as Albertans figure out the value of freedom from Canada, more and more people are coming on board. We're polling over 45% now in favor of independence, and a referendum hasn't even been called, right? Like, it's every week that goes by, the movement just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, right? And just for fun, those statistics that I was throwing out, I was on a podcast not too long ago, and somebody, like all the fact checkers decided to run my numbers through Grok. And apparently I exaggerated a little bit. I say $78 billion a year leaves Alberta to get less than 20 back. Grok confirmed that it's $68.8 billion a year that leaves Alberta. And we get less than $10 billion a year back in direct federal transfers. So it's, there's the math. I mean, the math mitigates entirely against Alberta staying in Canada.
But clearly, the Prime Minister is calling your bluff here. He doesn't take your movement very seriously. If he did, then perhaps he would push a little harder, in fact, a lot harder, to get this pipeline greenlit rather than simply, pushed off into the distant future somewhere or never. I mean,
yeah, and I think the only thing I can say to that is you can always tell a Liberal, you just can't tell them much, right? I think they're in denial. I think, I think they have their agents in Alberta, like Jason Kenney. Oh, don't worry about it. We've got this under control. They're just a bunch of yahoos. This isn't going anywhere. I mean, there's an economist by the name of Martin Armstrong, and Martin Armstrong specializes in looking at political economic movements and then predicting where they're gonna where things are gonna end up. And he's got an amazing track record. He predicted in terms of the things that he's predicted. Martin Armstrong has predicted that the economic case for Alberta independence is so strong that he sees Alberta being an independent country in 2 years.
2 years.
And I think that's the path we're on. We're looking to have a referendum by September of 2026, so less than a year from now. And I'm telling you, like, Alberta unemployment right now is at 9%. Youth unemployment is over 20%. Indigenous unemployment is over 60%. I mean, you don't think people are going to be ready to vote for independence like 12 months from now when Alberta unemployment is over 10%, youth unemployment is over 25%?
Yeah,
I mean, it's, people don't understand that Albertans deeply resent the Liberals turning Alberta into Newfoundland. Effectively, that's what they've done.
And if you do have a successful referendum, then you might get the Fed say, all right, we see how serious you are. We'll grant you your pipeline. I mean,
yeah, but at that point, it's too late. We're gone. It's like, sorry, you punched us in the face for the last time. We've got a divorce lawyer, right? We're working, here are the papers. The only thing for you to do is to sign. And if people think that the United States isn't going to immediately recognize or support a yes vote in Alberta, they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the United States sees it in their national interest, and I've had these discussions with the Americans. They see it in their national interest to get Alberta out from underneath the control of communist China. And the Americans, the Americans literally see Ottawa as being controlled by China, and that Ottawa is literally managing the Alberta economy for the benefit of communist China, which is to say, destroying the entire Canadian economy so that the Chinese in Brookfield can come in and buy it up at pennies on the dollar.
And last time we spoke, you talked about going down to DC and having meetings. You didn't say with who. I mean, have those discussions with the Americans, or
you froze there, Mark.
Am I back now?
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, as I sort of said there, I mean, last time we spoke, you said you were in DC, you went to Washington and had conversations with various players connected to the Trump administration about the possibility of Alberta's ultimate decision to go. Have those talks continued? And
I'm in touch with them weekly now, and we're talking about going back down again in December for further discussions. The long and the short of it is that the United States is very concerned about the fact that Carney is busily turning Canada into a third world hellhole, right? They're doing little or nothing to stop, the Chinese from shipping fentanyl precursor chemicals into Canada. They're doing little or nothing to address all of the gangs that are working in conjunction with the Ministry of State Security in China, shipping fentanyl precursor chemicals into Canada. They are deliberately thumbing their nose at the United States on an ongoing basis, right? We can eliminate our trade deficit tomorrow and our underfunding of NATO by simply announcing a $60 billion a year purchase contract for helicopters, surveillance drones, armored personnel carriers, all of the things that are needed to patrol the US-Canadian border, right? We'd wipe out the trade deficit overnight and would vastly improve our relationship with the US. But instead, what's Carney doing? Oh, I think Canada should join the EU. I think we should enter into a $200 billion military buildup agreement with the Europeans where we will only buy European equipment. Thanks so much, United States, for defending us for the last 30 years while we didn't spend any money whatsoever on our military. Thank you so much for letting us live under your military protection and umbrella. But now screw you, elbows up. We don't want to talk to you anymore because, Mark Carney has declared our relationship with the United States over while we announce, a strategic alliance with communist China, who incidentally we're still at war with because we've never signed a peace deal over Korea. You can't make this stuff up. It's ludicrous.
And I think maybe there are Americans who think, as long as we get Alberta on side, have a relationship with them, or maybe even incorporate them into the American family, what do we need the rest of Canada for? Except
absolutely. Yeah. We're Alberta in a free market with the United States with zero tariffs on both sides of the Alberta-U.S. border. Who needs the Royal Bank? We'll have J.P. Morgan Chase. We'll have we'll have Wells Fargo. We'll have all the American banks like Toronto Dominion. So what's the problem, right? Everything that we're doing in Alberta could be so much better. Something people don't focus on is that Alberta has 90% of its trade is with the U.S. Only 10% is with the rest of Canada and the rest of the world. So we just need to make up 10% of that trade, which we can pick up through two pipelines. One, out through Washington State, just like Nutrien announced recently, they're building shipping facilities for potash in Washington State. We could get a deal done to have an oil terminal for Alberta Oil in Washington State overnight. To hell with BC, right? Start stopping every truck coming through BC to Ontario at the border, hold them up for 2 weeks, inspect them for rats. Let's see how EB likes that. If he wants to hold up a pipeline. I mean, all the leverage doesn't go one way, but Danielle Smith doesn't have the guts to do it. She makes empty threats and empty promises. That's the problem.
Last question, Jeff. Tomorrow, once this deal is tabled, and I guess Danielle Smith tries to sell it to Albertans, what is the prognosis in terms of discussions going forward between the ongoing political issues that Danielle may very well have as a result of trying to pass off a deal that doesn't really exist because it pushes a pipeline construction into the distant future, if at all? And what happens after that?
Well, I think the problem for Danielle is she's completely blown all of her credibility with her base, right? So, Albertans aren't stupid. I mean, we've been around this game for, forever, right? So, we know what liberal promises are worth. They're worth nothing. So, and again, if, as a gesture of good faith, the first thing that, Carney should have done was pass a bill in Parliament to get rid of the tanker ban. Because how do you raise money? Like, how do you raise private money to invest in a pipeline when there's federal law saying that the oil out of that pipeline can't be put into ships and taken offshore? You can't raise money under those circumstances, but they won't do it. So, like these 9 bad laws, I mean, instead, we'll increase the industrial carbon tax. We'll get rid of the emissions cap, but we'll double the industrial carbon tax. Like, what does that do to investment in Alberta? Like, it kills it. Like, we can't build AI centers in Alberta. Carney doesn't want us to anyway, because we would hook them up to natural gas fields that we have 10,000 years supplies out of. No, he wants us all buying Brookfield nuclear reactors, so that every time we plug in an electric car we don't want, the money gets siphoned out of our wallet through a wall socket into Carney's offshore bank account. Like, we're fed up. Like, we're done.
You can't make this stuff up, can you?
No, you can't. We're living the Confucian curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm now joined by Colin Craig from secondstreet.org, and he's got an update on a rather grim statistic: 100,000 Canadians dying on wait list since 2018. He's been crunching the numbers, and he joins us now from Calgary. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And good for you for gathering these numbers. I know it's not easy when you're dealing with different provinces with different rules, but this 100,000 number really stands out as a grim statistic. How did you come to this? And maybe you could talk a little bit about this grim milestone.
Yeah, so I mean, the story starts probably around 2018-19 when our think tank was getting up and running. We were reflecting on a sad story from Ontario. Laura Hillier, young girl, she was, I think, 19 at the time, died on a waiting list because of delays in the healthcare system. They just took too long to get to her. And we got thinking with stories like hers that got us thinking, like, how often does this happen? Because governments do not proactively tell the public, this is how many patients are dying on waiting lists. So we thought, well, let's try and gather some data, and we were successful at it. We've been able to gather data, at least partial data across the country for several years now, and that's how we tallied up over 100,000 cases now where patients have died waiting for appointments with specialists, diagnostic scans, and surgeries.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that people are dying because they can't get like MRIs and other types of diagnostic tests, I mean, that's really bad. I mean, you can almost expect that people will certainly die waiting for livers or kidneys, these types of things, but they're actually dying because they can't get the proper testing that they need. That is terrible.
Yeah, it's a wide array of cases that the data represents. So it's everything from heart surgery and heart procedures, which obviously, if you're not getting that in time, you can die, to, on the other end of the spectrum, things like maybe a hip operation or cataract surgery. And people sometimes say, well, you're not going to die because you don't get cataract surgery. To which, we often say, well, wait a second. One, it's a quality of life thing for a lot of people. I mean, no one wants to spend the final years of your life with cloudy vision, or maybe you've got severe pain because you're waiting for a hip operation, whatever. But you could also maybe have an accident because you've got cloudy vision, and that you die because of that. Or maybe because you've got severe pain while you're waiting for your hip operation, that you're not mobile, you're stuck in your apartment, you're not getting exercise. And we all know exercise is so important for the body that, if you don't get it, that can contribute to a reason why you die, maybe like a heart attack or something like that. So, I don't think generally we can dismiss these numbers. I mean, they're not good. And what we want governments to do more than anything is, number one, do a good job tracking this information, analyze it, right? So you can figure out where all the problem points are, make changes as necessary, but also to disclose it to the public. So that's what needs to be done around this. More broadly speaking, we need to change the system because the system has been failing for years. Too many patients are falling between the cracks. It's really bad out there. And, we're talking numbers today, Mark, but there's lots of really bad stories, individual Canadian stories behind these numbers.
Absolutely. Each one of those numbers is a person.
Yeah.
You talk about disclosure, and it sounds to me like some of these provinces would rather not say, how many people are dying on wait lists. Is that what's going on here? Are some of them just digging in their heels, refusing to issue bad news because they don't want to make it public?
I think so. I mean, it's crazy if you think about it. Governments will hold a press conference if they're buying like a new pencil sharpener for a school or something, right? They find all these excuses to hold press conferences when it's good news. But there's no disclosure of this data proactively. I mean, we can even tell that in many cases, governments aren't even looking at the data themselves because they'll give us a bill and they charge us because they're having to go out and collect the data together. But if they were already collecting the data, then they wouldn't charge us. So that's how we know that they're often just not even really paying attention to these statistics. But I'll tell you a crazy comparison, Mark, is if you look at the fact that across Canada every single day, you've got government health inspectors walking into restaurants, and if they find even the most minor problem, they write it up and often it gets posted publicly, something like a missing paper towel holder. Well, we have people dying in the government's healthcare system. And too often we hear about these individual stories, not because the government comes forward to let the public know they've let someone down, but because the patient's family comes forward. So there's a huge element of hypocrisy here where the governments just are not holding themselves to the same standard as everyone else.
And in fact, these numbers may actually be low because some people, of course, opt for suicide, essentially. The MAID program, just sadly becoming more popular all the time. I think of it as the fastest growing industry in Canada is death. And the government, it seems, would rather offer people the quote easy way out for them because it's less expensive. And so you really don't know, and maybe you'll be looking into this in the future, how many people are opting for suicide rather than get on a wait list and just prolonging the agony.
Yeah, it is something that we're going to be digging into because we have heard these anecdotes where someone has applied for assisted suicide from the government because they're living in chronic pain. And we actually heard of one case where the government said, no, we're not going to give you assisted suicide because, there's a treatment for your problem. And the guy said, well, I've been waiting 20 years for this treatment. Like he'd been trying to get the government to provide him the treatment that would help him and they wouldn't do it. And so, it's crazy. We want to know like how often that's actually happening. I mean, big picture, if I could leave your listeners with one message, it's this. We have traveled to Sweden and France and Japan where they have public universal healthcare systems. That's what Canadians want, a working system. And in those countries, they don't have the wait times like we have. You're getting in much, much faster. And so what we want is achievable, but we have to make the types of changes that will bring our system closer to those European models in particular, giving patients choice between using the public system or paying privately if they want to. This allows public systems to focus on helping those who don't have the means to pay. Another big change is that in those systems, they fund services to patients, whereas we fund healthcare systems. So governments throw money into a healthcare system and they hope the money trickles down to help patients. It's a big difference. Their systems are incentivized to help patients and make sure those dollars are spent on doctors and nurses rather than bureaucrats. So, those are just a couple differences, but the big picture point is we can improve, but we've got to be copying what these other countries are doing better, particularly in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, we spend as much money as anybody else or most other countries, if I'm not mistaken. And so
No.
where's the problem here? Why aren't those dollars ending up, providing frontline care for people who need it? You to just walk into any emergency ward these days and line up, unless you're dying and seconds count, you end up waiting sometimes 8, 10 hours for a doctor to see somebody. I mean, that's absolutely ludicrous in a country like Canada. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask, since we spend all this money, where is it going? Is it just going to the bloated bureaucracy, middle management, upper management, at the expense of frontline care? Uh, what do you see as a possible solution here? Incorporating, private as well as public? You see a mix here. Would that be a possible solution?
Yeah, so we need less ideology in healthcare. I mean, that's the fundamental problem, or one of the fundamental problems. And so what governments should be doing is deciding how much they're going to pay for different procedures. You get your finger operated on, that's going to be less complex than a heart surgery, right? So you figure out how much you're paying to fix a finger, how much you're doing for heart surgery, whatever. And then governments should open it up to anyone with qualified staff to do those types of procedures. Shouldn't matter if it's a government clinic or a private clinic or a nonprofit. They'd all get the same flat amount of money when they provide that service. This approach would create a good, transparent, level playing field, like I say, that you often find in countries like France and over in Europe. And that way, you start to get a little bit more competition. You're incentivizing output because you're paying to get for something when it gets done, rather than just throwing it into a system and hoping that the money makes its way down to helping patients.
It's early days. Has your study received any reaction, maybe from political figures or others in the healthcare field, maybe patients?
Yeah, I mean, not at this point for this particular report. We drew attention to a problem in Manitoba earlier this year where a patient died on a waiting list, and the government, they announced they were going to make some positive changes there. We're still waiting to see those changes get done, but there's the two elements here. There's one, the whole accountability aspect related to this. We need governments to change on that, track the data, analyze it, disclose it. But we need the broader reforms to happen. And the good news is that when it comes to the broader reforms to prevent these problems from happening in the first place, the Alberta government in particular has announced a few major changes that they're going to make that will help to reduce waiting lists. It will bring the Alberta system closer towards those European models that I was talking about. Quebec is doing a couple good things too. They're doing one thing that's not going over very, very well with doctors there, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But we're seeing some positive changes in the country, but by far the leader right now is Alberta, and we need to see more provinces follow in Alberta's footsteps.
How do people support your organization?
Well, thank you. I mean, people could go to our website. It really helps if people look at our information, share it, and if they really like what we're doing, they can make a donation. Like I say, it helps us pay to get this data and pry it out of government's hands.
Colin Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
And that is it for this edition of Straight Up. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again soon, shall we? Bye-bye for now.